Wherefore, Series 3, Episode 50. Endings are arbitrary in their very nature. They are the imposition of order onto a world that rarely makes much sense. Endings are the illusion of control, the promise of coherence, the tempting bait that is meaning in an otherwise meaningless existence. Normally what happens when we choose an endpoint in a story is that we announce what the important bit is. The crime is solved. The couple are married. The Gothic mansion burns down, taking the screaming villain of the piece with it. Justice appears to prevail. We've set our terms, and on those terms we have resolution and can safely type the end. It's not really the done thing to just stop a story abruptly. Nor is it advisable to just fall off it like a drunk person falling off children's playground equipment. But what else is there? So long as Stroud continues, there are story threads unwinding and tangling together. Things keep happening. And just when you think you've got one story arc figured out, another one gets complicated. Soap operas are more like life than any other story form we use, and yet somehow they are not considered high art at a time when literature spurns the fantastical. What sort of tidy ending could we have? Could wipe out the town in a single dramatic disaster, which wouldn't be true to the life of Stroud, but would be a very coherent sort of endpoint. I could run away, thus ending my role as an observer. I seriously considered this as a plot device, but honestly it would take a lot of effort. I could spend a few weeks tying all of the story threads together in some excessively complicated knot in which all of the disparate things turn out to be part of one big plot that can then be entirely resolved. But it would have to be far-fetched, even by Wherefore standards. I would have to stretch your credulity a long way to manage it. Perhaps it is more honest to just stop badly, a bit like someone falling off a bike. I had planned to stop. I'd hoped to have a narratively sensible place at which to stop, if not a coherent ending. I'd felt the vibrations in the weave and sensed that other things would come and that I might be too busy with being me to spend so much time talking about how the world looks from where I'm sitting. But it's not a sensible endpoint. My mouth is intermittently home to interdimensional spiders. I am growing an extra toe. The cast of wonderful and unlikely people who swirl through these tales, being more and less real, show no signs of being done with their plots and schemes. There are clearly more tales to tell, and some of these stories are a long way short of concluding. What happens next? I don't really know. Only that it will. Life is a series of things that happen, and there is a lot more happening to come. I've found comfort in being the weaver of this story. Sooner or later, of course, the story cloth has to come off the loom, because cloth cannot be infinite in the way that life is, but there are always new tales to tell, new cloth to weave, new magical threads to pull together. You now know something of how that works. We are all in the process, albeit with varying degrees of deliberateness, of weaving life out of stories and stories out of life. The difference between being a regular person who weaves stories and being an actual weaver is simply one of intent. A weaver intends to get something done. In my case, the weaving has been as much about crafting holes where other things can get through. Stroud needs its dreams. It needs its weak places where the past touches the present and where impossible things can and do happen. It's a fine balance, being solid enough to hold together and delicate enough to be interesting. Do you want your reality to be a fine and ever-changing lace? Or would you like a firm and reliable burlap sack? Probably both at different times. There's comfort and security to be had from predictable, substantial things, but sometimes we all need a little mayhem just to stop us getting bored. The trick is not to accidentally weave yourself a lacy sack, only to find you are not bored because the things that were supposed to be securely in a sack are now rampaging uncontrolled in the wider world. I do tend to make sacky lace, though, things that look delicate and unlikely but are really held together by rather basic, solid, earthy things. What is Wherefore, if not lace made out of a sack? And so this is not the end of the story. This is not the dramatic final showdown of an episode, nor is it the point at which the whole thing miraculously resolves into some kind of coherence. That's never going to happen. And if you were waiting for me to pull it all together, I can only apologise. It's not a cliffhanger ending either, because this is an episode in which nothing much really happens, and I just maundered on about it for a few minutes. It's the arbitrary decision that 50 episodes is a sensible length for a series, and that 3 series is far more than I ever meant to write when I started. Listen carefully, and you may hear the sound of the Wherefore bicycle crashing slowly into the undergrowth, having been surprised by a bear. There are a few tooting sounds, as though a selection of creatures who are partly instruments are greatly amused by the spectacle. It can only be a matter of time until it is returned to its upright position and starts trundling around again.